Does YouTube have a double standard with regard to offensive or violent content that it blocks? Does the company give more leeway to violent extremists overseas than obnoxious filmmakers here at home? I'm Bill Whittle filling in for Alan Barton. Stay tuned for The Front Page. Well, we've spoken about free speech on the show before and the need to stand up for the First Amendment, but what about regulation of speech not by a government but by a company? Joining me in studio to discuss this subject are Rituparna Basu of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights and Terry Jones of Investors Business Daily. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have here a situation where the Media Research Center has called into question YouTube's guidelines for blocking content on its site. Now, we saw the Innocence of Muslims video, which was ostensibly the cause for the murder of our ambassador in Benghazi and the riots and all this other stuff that had happened. And paradoxically, it seemed to me at the time and now in reflection that YouTube and Google stood up and kept that video online despite calls by the President of the United States and members of Congress to bring it down. You would think that the elected representatives of our government, Terry, would be the ones who would be protecting the First Amendment's rights. We'll get to the situation in Pakistan in just a moment, but it looked to me in that case that Google and YouTube had a far clearer idea of what this country is about than the President of the United States.
Well, they did, and as a private enterprise, one that has protections of our Constitution, they knew it was their right to, to air whatever they wanted to air on their device. But the thing that bothers me about this is that there was a great deal of hypocrisy on this from the very beginning by the administration, because the administration used this movie as a pretense for for covering up their own incompetence in the security of the Benghazi consulate. And when that happened, they basically pretended that it was all this video's fault, and shame on you, YouTube, for putting it on your, on display. Well, it really wasn't the video at all, and this is, has a chilling effect in the future because, YouTube might, start thinking, well, maybe we can't put anything up of any controversial nature. And after a while, you start wondering, well, what kind of free speech do we have if anytime somebody puts something on the air, it can be shouted down, basically.
Did you get that take, Rita? Because I think Barack Obama actually doubled down on this when he spoke at the United Nations. He said something essentially to the effect of, listen, it's virtually impossible for me to suppress this free speech when anybody can just upload something from an iPhone. I mean, I'd love to control it if I can, but it's out of my control. You can't blame me for this.
Yeah, there's definitely, from this administration, freedom of speech is not that key of an issue. It's not something really to protect. And this is an example of that. And it's broader than just this administration. If you think of things like campaign finance laws, those violate your free speech. You should be able to spend your money and support who you want. Or if you think during Obamacare what happened, a lot of insurance companies wrote to their policyholders and said, hey, if this law goes through, your premiums are going to go through the roof. We might not be able to offer you any plans. And what did the government do? They suppressed that speech. This is a long-standing trend of the government stopping people from saying things they don't like. And sometimes it's to cover up their own mistakes.
Incompetence, yeah, that's right. Well, here's a clip of somebody who knows a little thing about it or two. Here's a clip of author Salman Rushdie responding to a question about free speech and the Innocence of Muslims movie.
It's clear that you have to defend things you don't agree with. Otherwise, what is free speech if it's only for people that you sort of agree with? And often in the free speech argument, you find yourself defending stuff you really dislike. And I mean, I've seen this film, and it's as bad as it can be, for a start. I mean, it's so incompetent that you wonder that anybody could get upset about it.
Well, as our viewers may know, Rushdie has been targeted by Muslim extremists who would gladly pay to see him killed. So this is an especially important subject to him. So here's a man who put his life on the line by publishing the work of his, oh my God, it's slipped my mind. The Satanic Verses. Yeah. Thank you very much. So here's Salman Rushdie basically coming out and saying what most of us believe, that there is no such thing as limited free speech or constrained free speech. It's either free or it's not. You obviously have to protect the stuff that you don't want to protect. President Obama says the future does not belong to those who insult the prophet. Seems to me that the President of the United States ought to be willing to defend my right to insult the Prophet if I choose to do that.
Yeah, and he's sworn, by the way, to defend your right to free speech. He's not sworn to defend, the Prophet from any slanders. And the other, one of the key elements of this whole debate here is free speech is a sacred part of our rights, and YouTube has the right not to put it on if it sees it fit, sees fit, and it has a right to put it on if it sees fit, and that is a right that should not be trammeled by the federal government.
What do you think?
Well, there's only two real ways of changing the culture, changing anything. It's either you force someone to do something or you use your ideas to try to persuade them. And so what happens when the government is trying to suppress this sort of speech? It's very dangerous for people who disagree. And that's what we're seeing today, that if you disagree, if you have the guts to go out there and say something that is potentially offensive to Muslims, that your own government, which is supposed to be protecting you, is the one saying, no, 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 you can't do that. That's a really bad place to be for people who dissent.
The guts, because you will find major news organizations like the New York Times swearing up and down that the ability to do something like Serrano's piss Christ is essential to our society, but they won't publish anti-Muslim cartoons because they know that their people might be killed if they do it. Isn't this essentially rewarding this kind of violent behavior? Isn't this basically saying, yeah, if you kill a couple of our people, we won't upset you, but if you behave nicely, we'll do whatever you want us to do? It
is, and it basically opens up all of our rights to free speech to become basically channels of intimidation.
Hostage.
Yeah, if I can't say something, but another person can because he's threatening you if he's not able to express himself, well, then my right has been cheapened. And I think it's very important that our government, one of the few things it's supposed to do is defend the Constitution. I think it's very important that they stand up for our constitutional rights and never take a back seat on this.
That's right. If I'd been President of the United States, I would have said I'm going to spend every single military life that we have in uniform to defend that man's right to say what he wants to. That's why they're in uniform. And any attack on this individual is going to be considered an attack on the United States of America by whoever launches it. That's what I would have done. Anyway, a number of countries are demanding YouTube block this video from its site, including our NATO ally Turkey, our staunch ally Saudi Arabia, and of course Pakistan. A spokesperson for Google, which owns YouTube, released the following statement regarding its decision to block the video in Pakistan. Quote, "We work hard to create a community everyone can enjoy and which also enables people to express different opinions. This can be a challenge because what's okay in one country can be offensive elsewhere." This video, which is widely available on the web, is clearly within our guidelines and so will stay on YouTube. However, we've restricted access to it in countries where it is illegal, such as India and Indonesia, as well as in Libya and Egypt, given the very sensitive situations in these two countries. Rita, that actually strikes me as reasonably balanced. I don't know why. I mean, if I understood it as I read it, it sounds to me like they're saying, no, in the United States of America, we cherish the right of free speech. We're going to put it up there and you're not going to take it down no matter what the President of the United States says we're going to do. However, in countries where it's illegal, we often block content in countries where it's illegal for us to provide it. What did you think? Do you think that's a reasonable statement?
The real hypocrisy here is that these countries who find this video particularly offensive, so they're not okay with this video because it's made by an American, because apparently insults their view of what Islam is, and they say Islam is a compassionate religion and it's not about terrorism or anything like that. But they turn a blind eye to a lot of other very, very dangerous content on YouTube. For example, the Taliban has a YouTube channel. Now, I don't see these countries calling for these videos to be taken down. That is very hypocritical, and it really makes you question, what are their motives?
Terry, we're watching some B-roll now of enemies of everything we stand for, using YouTube not only as a recruiting site, but as a propaganda site, primarily as a recruiting site. There it is. We're looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's propaganda and it's recruitment. And just like Salman Rushdie, I have seen the film The Innocence of Muslims, and it is a terrible piece of garbage. It's
unwatchable.
It's an unwatchable movie, and anyone who thinks that could incite anybody to anything other than laughter at how abysmal the filmmaking was, I think is dead wrong. But when you see one of these things are deadly earnest. they go out there and there are, you know, impressionable minds out there that are going to watch these Taliban movies and be swayed by them. And I think, you know, if YouTube were under my control, I would not be putting them on.
Yeah. I think to me the most shocking thing was how all of these Hollywood filmmakers who have told us for generations, guys like Martin Scorsese when he made The Last Temptation of Christ, we have to be able to make films that are offend people. Not one of them stood up for this 2-bit filmmaker who is a hack, but that's not the point.
Yep.
He has the same right as Steven Spielberg, and I wonder if it had been a $200 million movie about Muhammad directed by Steven Spielberg, how silent the Hollywood community would have been then had the President of the United States say you have no right to make this film. That's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. Thanks very much for joining us today. For Terry and Rita Parnu, I'm Bill Whittle. You've been watching Front Page.